Hi, Jim.
Hey, Kate.
What a combo.
Oh, wow. Too good. No, that was so good. As I mentioned in the episode, so many people grew up on the OC and Gossip Girl. I mean, maybe you could speak to that more than I could even.
I would have been a freshman in high school when those kids were seniors. And so rewatching Gossip Girl, I've already rewatched the OC. The Gossip Girl cast, I'm like seeing what it was like for me to be a kid. It's not that long ago, you know, and to think how different it is to be a kid now and how attached we are to these things that didn't exist.
It's almost unbelievable.
It really is unbelievable. Like, there was no social media. We just experienced life in the moment.
But it was just great to do it. It's so personal in so many ways. I mean, I've known Josh for a damn long time and his whole family, of course. Always been proud of what he's done, but I think even now you really see that big cultural impact, you know, how much the industry's changed. We'll see. It'll be fun to watch what else he does from here. And I think that's also exciting. He's 50, I'm 60. These milestone moments in your life, can you keep going and creating something new? I think that is something I'm going to take away from this episode, is that he just kept going and inventing new great content that new audience, different types of audiences connected to. And I think that's a rare, somewhat unprecedented talent.
And it's a reminder that in hard times, art really brings us through. Storytelling is something we've been doing since the dawn.
It unites people, right? It's something we all, you know, the water cooler, whatever you want to call it. We don't really have a water cooler anymore. But these things that do unite us, you got to always keep embracing the new. And if you embrace the new, it can come and be great. I think it's that resistance to it. I mean, he talked about selling out. Given what we do in my realm, the commercial realm, I love seeing these two things get married every once in a while and sometimes to great effect. So it's why I do what I do.
And you keep moving forward. You're following the tides. You're not resisting, you know, so.
No, gotta go.
I mean, Jim looks incredible.
I look incredible. This was all in honor of Chris McCullough. I will take it off for the duration, but I just had to have it on for the beginning because Josh coined this amazing phrase, Chris McCullough, that everybody talks about and they don't know where it came from. But
we should have trademarked it.
I know. You really should have. So thanks for doing the Get Real podcast with me. I appreciate it. We're going to talk about your wildly successful career with hits like Gossip Girl and the OC and Chuck. I can't wait to hear about what the big new hit will be next. I'm a reality TV guy. I have a hunch the OC is why Laguna Beach and The Hills and Real Housewives of Orange County came to be. I mean, I think you can take some credit for that, I would hope.
100%. I mean, they would admit it. Mark Cherry, who created Desperate Housewives, he said Desperate Housewives would never have gotten on the air if it had, you know, been for the OC. So it was definitely a show that its first year made a big impact.
It did. It was really, there hadn't been anything really quite like it. It matched a lot of things. But why do you think audiences like to watch wealthy people misbehave?
Yeah, I think people like to be taken somewhere they can't ordinarily go, right? So you're offering this escapism. You're offering this opportunity to see these incredible homes, beaches, just this part of the world. And it's amazing to me how many people I have met around the world who the OC really kind of became their idea of the California dream. I've been stopped by people who said, I learned English because of the OC. I moved to California because of the OC. It's pretty wild. But I think people, to answer your question, love to go have access to a world they wouldn't ordinarily have access to. But then they also like to know that as rich and beautiful as these people are, they still have problems. Their lives are still fucked up. And to know that even though it appears they have everything, you watching at home are probably happier and have less issues than these people whose lives you think you want.
I know. Well, you know, that's I think why all those shows continue today. But you also were kind of a groundbreaker and it was novel. Like the music was a big part of the show. I remember talking to you about that because you thought mine and Audra's taste in late 90s music was kind of funny. Had we seen that before? I don't think we ever saw music in a show till your show.
Maybe not to the degree that we did. I mean, certainly 90210 would have their moments. I think it was an interesting confluence. MTV was still happening, but definitely kind of very much in its like Y2K boy band era and was pretty consolidated in terms of what it would play. Radio was incredible. You get like 10 songs on the radio. It was pre Spotify, pre-Apple Music, post-Napster. So it was this weird moment where there wasn't really an opportunity to discover new music if you lived in the middle of the country, if you lived somewhere where you didn't have access. And I was writing music into the show that I just loved. I was in my mid-20s and shopping at Amoeba Records and going to a lot of concerts. And this was stuff that wasn't Orange County music. It wasn't part of that scene. It was music that was really there to kind of illuminate the emotional lives of the characters. And what we found was there was a huge audience out there of people who were desperate to discover new music. And the show became really one of the only avenues that you could do so. We would talk about Death Cab on the show, which, by the way, I was hanging out with Adam Brody, and he was a huge Death Cab and Bright Eyes fan, and I just wrote that into the show. And immediately people would respond to that, or you'd see their sales go up. We did an episode where the kids go see the band Rooney, and everyone says Rooney a lot in the course of the episode, and there was some huge spike in their sales after. So it started also, we didn't have a lot of money. We were a new show. A lot of these bands were a little wary. It was still the era where you could sell out. That was still a concept. Obviously now we are in a post selling out world. That's the goal now. But we still had a little bit of that Gen X mentality about don't sell out. And I think for these bands, they were wary at first of like licensing their music to a teen soap on Fox. But then they saw that we really were fans and how we used the music. It was cheaper because they were indie rock bands, so we could afford it. They needed the additional income. So they said yes, and then we're pleased with the results. So it started that way, and then we would get calls. Alex Pitsavis, our music supervisor, would call and say, hey, how do you feel about premiering the new Beastie Boys song on the show? Because their management just reached out. And you're like, what? U2 has reached out to see, would you premiere their new album on the show? Beck. I remember Alex and I went to Capitol Records because Coldplay had a new album coming out. And they said, sit on the couch, listen to the album, pick a song, and we'll save it for you. And so we listened to the album. Fix You came on, and I just said, I don't know where it's going, but that feels like the show. So they held on to that song, and we premiered it on the show. And so there's lots of crazy music things started to happen.
Any scenes that were almost cut but ended up becoming iconic? I don't know how they finalize these shows. You know better than I do, but anything we might have missed?
Anything you might have missed. I remember there were things that we've talked a lot about this around the 20th anniversary of the show about like, what is your biggest regret on the show? And I have a lot of regret. It was my first time doing it. There was mistakes made creatively that if I could do it over again, I would, but you can't. You can only learn and grow. And we were moving fast. But obviously the biggest thing we get asked about is the death of Marissa Cooper. That is something we've been pretty open about, having regrets about creatively, and that there was definitely a better creative solution to what felt like for us had become a bit of a storyline that we were having a hard time kind of coming up with new ground. And so Marissa's character took it hard on Television Without Pity. And she was just a little bit of the no fault of Misha's, just that character became kind of the one that they would complain about. And so we thought, oh, we're going to do this crazy, shocking thing. There was a lot of kind of practical reasons behind it as well in terms of the ratings. And in any event, the night the episode aired on Tumblr, which was big, on whatever your forums were that existed, there was like almost like a primal scream, like this reaction from the internet.
I kind of remember this. Yeah.
That I had not heard from before. Most people watch television. They don't feel the need to immediately go online and write up everything they feel about it, positively or negatively, as fans. They're just watching the show and enjoying it. These are their friends. They like having them in their living room. They aspire to dress like them or listen to their music. And, it's fantasy and it's escapism, and it's why we watch television. They were so upset. And it was like in this anguished way where I remember that night saying to Stephanie, what have we done? We have completely miscalculated who's watching the show and why. And it was a really good lesson that the internet is really a 1-to-1 ratio, meaning one person on the internet complaining is only representative of that one person. It doesn't mean one person on the internet equals 10,000 people. And there's many, many more people who are watching your show, enjoying your show, and then going on with their lives. And that was really, really valuable to learn. Unfortunately, we learned it a bit too late in that case.
You survived it. Can you share some of the wish you could have done it different?
Absolutely. I mean, I think one of the biggest things is we had a cast in that first season that people really gravitated towards. There was like all of our main cast, but then Luke and Anna. Part of the appeal of the first season of the show was how quickly it was moving. And people were like, what? They're doing this now? That's crazy. This show is insane. But we were moving so quickly, and we wrote some characters off of the show. And we really had a lot more to mind with those characters, with those actors. And you try to bring in new characters in future seasons. It's very hard to get people to gravitate to new characters in the same way that they do to those original characters. Maybe over time, and we learned this, you can bring in 1 or 2 characters per season that can kind of have that traction. But to try to like wholesale, it's very hard. It's a tall order for an audience who's trying to learn your show and was attached to those characters.
And got invested in these characters.
Exactly.
It's amazing it was only on for 4 seasons because I think its cultural and social impact was much bigger.
For those first couple of years, really.
Massive, right?
Yeah, and it was on Fox, so it was on a major broadcaster. It was on with American Idol. The amount of eyeballs, that would watch a show back then versus now is so different. We were really kind of one of the test shows of this new internet era, not just in terms of the fan interaction, also just how people consume culture back then.
So lightning rarely strikes twice in this business, but on the heels of the OC was Gossip Girl, which arguably had a bigger cultural impact and artistic impact, adapted from a series of novels. How'd you find that IP? Were you out looking for it for a new show, or?
We knew the 4th season of the OC was going to most likely be the end. Hope springs eternal, but we had a feeling. And I was down the road actually working on Chuck with Chris Vidak, who was this really brilliant guy I went to USC film school with, and we could talk about that in a second, and was sent by the people at Alloy Publishing through my agents, the Gossip Girl books. And as I said, Stephanie Savage and I we met working on the OC. She eventually became a writer and producer on the show full time. And we had just forged this really close creative partnership. And when I got sent the Gossip Girl books, I read it, the first book, and I immediately sent it to her. And I was like, I got sent this book. I really feel like it needs a female point of view. No one I'd rather work with than you. I think you would crush this. If you dig it, let me know. And she read it and immediately responded to it and was an absolutely perfect person to do that show with. She was the day-to-day showrunner of that show when we launched, and her ability to not just with story and character, but fashion and that New York world was just, sometimes who you partner with can be just as important as the great idea that you have, or that is your great idea.
I mean, I would argue this one is up there in the all-time most important shows ever on television. I mean, that's a lot. But I mean, from a cultural standpoint and the careers you launched, these people all work today, but that was their start. How do you find these people? I guess casting agents, right? I mean,
casting directors. Yeah, we, Patrick Rush on the OC and Chuck, David Rappaport, who did the Gossip Girl pilot. When you're making shows with young characters in them, they're going to be discoveries. I mean, I remember on Gossip Girl, when we set it up, the internet was like, you must cast Blake Lively as Serena van der Woodsen. And I did not know who she was at the time. And I looked her up, it was like, okay, she seems Serena-esque. So that was actually a moment where the internet was telling me, go look over here. But by and large...
So you played an active role, right? I mean, it's not like you were just handed these people.
No. You sit through, you're the casting director, obviously, is screening hundreds of people that you don't see. Apparently, Jennifer Lawrence auditioned for the role of Serena.
Wow.
We never even saw her audition. You just hear about it years later when she's giving some interview. When we were casting for Marissa on the OC, it came down to Misha and this other young ingenue who had just moved to LA, was 19 years old, had no credits. Her name was Olivia Wilde.
Wow.
Wasn't quite the Marissa character, but we were like, this girl is like a phenomenal talent and just like feels like a star. And so we wrote that role for her in season 2, the first opportunity we had to work with her. And these are all people, at the beginning of their careers. When you are casting these kind of roles, they're not really stars. Some shows, you got to go land a star in order to get greenlit. And these shows are all about discovery. And, it's not just somebody who's great for the role, but also fits into this larger puzzle that you're, I remember we were casting the Gossip Girl pilot. Ed Westwick was Chuck Bass. He just brought something to it that...
My daughter's favorite character on any television show ever.
But, he was British.
I didn't know that.
And we didn't think his immigration papers approved in time to shoot the show. And they were literally like, you need to find another Chuck Bass. And we were like, we can't. And the second we had said, okay, probably his papers wouldn't have come through. But because we were like, we can't, there is nobody else who can play this part the way he can. Suddenly there was a rush and he got, the paperwork done. Just kind of happens.
That's stuff we almost missed. Do you stay in touch with these guys? Do you still see some of them around and hang out? Or
Rachel Bilson obviously was
that I know, yeah.
godmother to my kids. Brody and I are in touch. Zach just had a baby. Ben McKenzie is fighting the good fight against crypto. He was out here for his documentary, was premiering here. Yes, keep in touch with a lot of people. You feel a great sense of pride when you see someone you've cast go on and do great work, and other things.
So you exec produced Gossip Girl and Chuck, right? Two big hits at the time. You did a lot early on. Like you were a kid, essentially. I mean, how'd you do all this?
Well, not having kids, you can get a lot more done.
That's one part.
I don't know. I was always just extremely motivated. I'm very, very lucky in that from when I was a little kid, I would fill up my composition books with James Bond stories and Indiana Jones stories. I was always writing, always knew I wanted to be a writer, knew where I wanted to go to school. I knew what I wanted to study. I was actually frustrated when I was 22, and that first pilot didn't go for ABC. I was like, what's taking me so long?
What was that pilot?
It was called Brookfield. It was for ABC, and it was in a lot of ways a dry run for the OC. It was set at a prestigious boarding school. It had a blue-collar kid who came into that world. So there was definitely some stuff there that was clearly just grist for the mill.
Did you relate as a blue-collar kid?
Not as a blue-collar kid per se, but certainly as someone who feels like an outsider in a lot of situations, and definitely in that really Tony, next level kind of generational wealth environment. I just read Cameron Crowe's book, The Uncool, and that feeling of even with the access, there's still a part of you that just feels like, well, I'm not really one of them, part of the uncool. I think that's why I relate so much to his work. And I think that's why the themes in his stuff are so resonant, because a lot of people, we found out even with the OC, everybody feels like an outsider.
Yeah, I think that's true. That's true. It does drive you. So clearly, influence mentorship is key. You've mentioned Stephanie a few times. I have a few Stephanies in my life who helped me get to where I got. Jen Gottlieb being, the most notable. But tell us a little bit about that relationship as your wing person in all this work.
She really wants us to do a masterclass on partnerships because we've been partners now for almost 20 years. And she's just a brilliant person, super creative, and puts my work ethic to shame. So definitely keeps me motivated. I think we just have a lot of respect for each other. I think because the way the relationship started was she was the producer on the OC and, she was partnered with McG. And I was this young writer and I didn't want to turn it. When I finished the OC pilot, I did not want to turn it in. I was like, it's not good. It doesn't work. And she was like, if you don't send it to me, I'm driving to your house and taking it out of your hands. And then when the show went, there was so much work. And obviously we had some great people working with us, but it's so much work and so many episodes. And it's 8 days per episode. And you've just finished writing something and then you blink and they've already shot it. And what's the next episode? And you're prepping, you're breaking stories, you're writing, you're rewriting, you're prepping, you're shooting, and you're editing all at the same time, while other episodes are airing and you're getting feedback on television without pity. I mean, it's like a full immersion in the show. And very early on in working together, I was like, I've worked with a lot of producers. You feel like you have more of the soul of a writer. And she had done writing, but a lot of it was uncredited. At a certain point, I was like, you should write an episode of the show. And because she didn't have any credited work, the network was like, well, the only way we can allow this is if you will guarantee the script. So I said, of course, I'll guarantee the script. And so then we switch roles and she talks about it as like all of a sudden she was the baby writer having to turn in the script to the showrunner. And so I think because we had that dynamic where I was the baby writer and she was the producer and then she was the baby writer, we were very comfortable being vulnerable creatively around each other, which is so key because you're going to pitch a lot of bad ideas. And you're going to go down a lot of creative dead ends and you're going to iterate. But the only way you get there is through being like, okay, this is really bad, but I just got to say it to get the conversation started, and having somebody there who's not going to like judge you, but go, yes, and kind of build off that creatively. So I think that vulnerability and transparency with each other creatively really helped us, build this long lasting creative partnership.
Writing about teens is tricky and you didn't have kids then, right? And To make a show entertaining, kids have to do things you wouldn't want your kids or your young audiences to do. Are there any storylines that were especially tough to write, or storylines you got heat for airing?
We certainly got heat for a lot of things. The Gossip Girl season 2 marketing campaign was basically just things that critics had said about the show and why parents shouldn't let their kids watch it. Every parent's nightmare was, one of the, I forget who said it, but like the parent teacher council or whatever. So that became like our marketing slogan, was how the show is out for teens.
Yeah.
My oldest, who just turned 14, I just let her watch the OC for the first time. She has not yet watched Gossip Girl, although I'm allowing it. Certainly not having kids, I didn't think about some of that stuff as much. Now knowing that she's watching it, we just produced a show this summer called Sterling Point that'll be on Amazon in August. And I definitely was the prude on this show. I'm now seeing things through the filter of imagining kids watching it, which does change your point of view. Maybe not, maybe it's better and you're more willing to take more risks. And because kids always want to view up, right? They always want to view something that feels like they're getting away with something. They don't want to feel like, oh, this feels a little young and safe.
But I do think it's different today a little bit. They don't tend to drink as much, or, they seem to be a little bit, well, they know more than we knew, right? When we were coming up, because we didn't have all this exposure. And I do think, like you said, I think we were almost more naive. I mean, I just had a holiday party with all the kids and they were like, I think they were rolling their eyes at the parents.
You guys were raging.
Yeah. I mean, it's a different thing because, really smartphones, social media have changed teens' lives. And I always talk about a health issue and impacted their mental health. Your characters on earlier shows used flip phones, took taxis. The way they interacted was different. Would you write the dynamics differently today?
I mean, the OC, the pilot Ryan uses a payphone. I mean, that's how quickly the world changed from, in those few years. And it's hard because it's more interesting and you have to kind of work a little harder to have people show up at your door for a face-to-face conversation when everything can be on text. But if everything's on text, it's not that interesting as a viewer. You kind of go, well, do you put an overlay on the screen and come up with some graphics things? Something we kind of done differently on different shows. The thing I'll say is, again, like I was saying, I grew up loving John Hughes and Cameron Crowe. Hopefully our shows were that equivalent for certain audiences, if there were fewer teen movies to go see, and it will continue on. You continue to make stuff for that audience. There will always be new teenagers and they'll always be looking for something.
Well, right. That seems to be your focus. How do we account, or do you account for the shrinking attention span? 27 episodes, now we're on 8 or 10 at the most when you're writing or pitching TV nowadays.
Well, it's interesting because part of the legacy, I think, of why Gossip Girl has endured, or why it feels like the legacy of the show is as big as it is because of Netflix. It's because of the second life it got. It's on HBO Max because it kind of goes on Netflix, then it goes on, then it goes back on. And when it hit Netflix again, like 2 years ago, or maybe a year or two ago, it was almost like it was a new show. It comes on Netflix, and I know for my daughter who was in 7th grade, all of her friends started binging the show as if it was a brand new show. And that is 6 seasons, and that's 100 and whatever it is, 18 episodes, I forget the exact number. And those kids are consuming it in like a matter of a week or two, depending on what their schedules are.
Right. There's the binging phenomenon.
Yeah, the binging. Because I watched the OC in a weekend. I'm like, what? That seems unhealthy. Yeah. I feel like the shorter episodes have less to do with attention spans and more to do with the economics and schedule of television and streaming and all of that. Because clearly these kids can sit for 118, 44-minute episodes, whether they're on a second screen while they're watching is probably we are as grown adults. That being said, I also see like my 10-year-old and she wants to just watch YouTube. She's less interested in watching even episodes of Disney Channel sitcoms, the Hannah Montana, the Nickelodeon sitcoms, which were kind of like where this younger audience would first get their education. And now they want to watch YouTube. There's a lot of someone saying like, have you noticed that The Rookie on ABC, which is like in year 8, is suddenly a massive show with Gen Z? And you're like, that's really interesting. It's about a 40-year-old cop. Like why? And it's because those shows get chopped up and put on TikTok. That's how Suits became the phenomenon that it did. People were watching it chopped up on TikTok. It actually drove them to discover the show when it hit Netflix. So these interesting way people watch Grey's Anatomy chopped up on, or certain storylines only through TikTok.
Well, you mentioned the economics. So when that stuff airs again, do you guys get royalties and residuals from those re-airings or not?
Yeah, it depends where it airs. Obviously, if somebody's chopping you up on TikTok, you're not seeing that. That's kind of like marketing money, I guess you could view it as, if it's driving them back to the show. But if the show gets licensed, that's good.
Right. So obviously a lot of changes in the industry. And how does this change how you work? I mean, massively. I know we've talked about it.
I mean, the amount of change in the last 5 years, I think would be like 20 years of a different business, a different industry. And the business is always in flux. I mean, even when I came in, there was a little bit of a sense of, I mean, obviously now we look back and we didn't realize how good we had it and all the things that we complained about, too many episodes, too short of a hiatus, whatever you would kill for now, because it was the sign of a healthy business. Everything shot in LA. We had to convince the studio to let us shoot Gossip Girl in New York because they wanted to shoot it in LA. The first instinct was always shoot it in LA because it was cheaper. And now that is just a bygone era. So it's a lot of flux. It's a lot of change. In the way that you conceive of a season of a story, that it has to last 8 or 10 episodes, you're building it differently than if it was supposed to run 22 or 25 episodes. But because there's been so much change and it's so much of it is out of your control, I was used to, you would turn something in to the network and the head of the network would get fired just as you're turning a script in and you're starting over again. In the last few years, it's the network itself that's getting fired. You know what I mean? Like the networks are disappearing or being sold. So it's just this sense of like, you can't take anything for granted. You have no idea, even if they were like, it's great and it's going to go, if that place is going to exist in 6 months. And at a certain point, you have to just accept that these things are totally out of your control. You can't predict it. You can't predict the market. And you just have to kind of go back to doing the way you used to do it, which is head down, ignore the noise, and follow the creative and hope it works out.
Yeah, good content, right? People will follow that. Let's talk about that because we worked on what was an online mini series, right, with the guys from Diageo and 21 Seeds with Summer, with Rachel. So how do you work with commercial entities? And is there some model that evolves that's a little bit more like self-book publishing? Something like that could be the next step. I don't know, maybe not.
Yeah, I mean, that was a really fun opportunity, I would say, that presented itself during the writer's strike. You're suddenly sitting around, you can't work. And I think we all have a sense that our business is, obviously we know it's going through change. We like to believe that there will still be a content business, that film and TV will endure. But I joke sometimes, it's like the movie where you're running across the bridge and the bridge is blowing up behind you and you're just trying to get to the other side before the bridge blows up. And so what are those next opportunities? Obviously, audiences are always going to want stories. Audiences are always going to want to connect with storytellers. We don't know what AI is going to mean for our business. It is something people are very worried about, concerned about, rightfully so, in a lot of different industries, not just our industry. Can it get all the way there? It can't yet replace a human being. Rick Rubin said something really interesting in an interview, which is all these different, whether it's Grok or ChatGPT, they're all basically trained to arrive at the same answer. That they're all being trained on the same amount of information, and that if you ask any one of them a question across any field, it's all modeled to get to the same answer. And that if you gave the same screenplay to 5 different directors, you would get 5 very different movies because it's going through the prism of each person's individual human experience. And that is something that AI, for now, cannot replicate. You go see a movie like One Battle After Another, that could only come from the mind of Paul Thomas Anderson. Nothing like it has existed before. And AI, again, is giving you whatever insight it is based on things that have already existed. So the ability for it to pitch you something that has never existed before, in the same way that Paul Thomas Anderson can dream up One Battle After Another, that is not here yet. So while there's a lot of concern around AI, there's also reasons to be hopeful that its reach will only go so far.
Well, I mean, you might leverage it, right? To help you. I would think you are or will.
It seems inevitable. Certain people in the industries, from the guilds, they have a very don't even mention AI. It's like, don't look up.
What are your guilds?
I'm in the Writers Guild, the Producers Guild, and the Directors Guild. And I think everybody has a slightly different approach, and we'll see how it all shakes out. I'm certainly not here to go to war with my guilds, but change is coming, and you can either pretend it's not, or you can figure out ways to at least understand it and see how you could leverage or utilize it. So the Diageo opportunity, how can we take what we know about storytelling and production and try to apply that towards commercials or short form content? Now there's a new business in verticals, which is like 45-second to 90-second episodes. A lot of people making those right now. Is that the future? We'll see. They certainly are hugely popular in Asia and Latin America. The race is on in North America to see if that is a viable new form that kind of lines up with how people are consuming things. None of these things will replace film or TV, but certainly we never would have thought 10 years ago that YouTube influencers would become bigger than movie stars, and they have. You could have someone that you or I have never heard of walk into a mall and cause a complete riot among kids 18 and under.
Totally. I see it. I see it a lot, and I have, no idea half the time. But tell me, in your next project, is Fake Empire going to try out the verticals?
Yeah, we're definitely looking at opportunities and seeing what those opportunities are, if it makes sense. When you start out as a young person in the business, you kind of always view yourself as like the young person in the business, and then enough young actors ask you what the 2000s were like, and you're like, oh wait, I'm the oldest guy in the room now. But with that comes the sense of like, oh, I actually have learned quite a bit, and I have some wisdom and experience that I can pass along, pass down.
Sweet. I mean, hard to go further than that. Drop the mic. We like to ask 3 questions when we end.
Okay.
Music's been crucial to your shows. Phantom Planets, California, Hallelujah. We're put back on the map, obviously, because of your shows. If you had a soundtrack for your life, what would that be?
I mean, my number one guy is Bob Dylan, right? And and Blood on the Tracks, and just that entire album, Don't Think Twice, It's All Right. I did have the opportunity 2 weeks ago to see David Byrne live in concert.
Oh, I've heard such great things about that.
Yeah. And actually, Audra was the one who turned me on to the Talking Heads.
Talking Heads, yeah.
I remember she had the cassette for Little Creatures and was playing And She Was. And I'm like, what is this? And it just, you get that spark, and all of a sudden you're buying all the tapes and learning everything about them. And I had the opportunity to see his Broadway show right after COVID. His music has meant so much to me for so long. And he's so joyful and idiosyncratic and just himself that you watch the show with like tears in your eyes. It's so joyous and emotional at the same time. So I feel like his music has just been incredibly important.
Yeah, we got a lot of people on the dance floor at this party with that this weekend. I mean, it was pretty remarkable. What's the best vacation you've ever taken?
Oh, wow. I should have prepared for this. That's a really good question. It has to be the first time I took my kids to Hawaii, I would say. I'm about to go again, and now I have a 10-month-old to join the other two.
Right. You got another one.
Another one, back to diapers. And so I think that opportunity of just having everybody together in this new addition to our family, I'm really excited about that. I feel like that could be the best vacation yet.
And then finally, what's something you're getting real honest about?
I mean, I'm turning 50 next year.
Oof.
Yeah.
It's unbelievable. That hit hard.
That's real. That's some real shit.
Yeah. All right. What do you think about it?
How did this happen? It kind of gives you a little more empathy.
I hear you. Man, thanks for doing this. This was so good. I mean, it's so meaningful this week for me. I'm going to get choked up. Thanks. You've made a lot of people happy through the shows that you created. I hope you're proud of yourself, because we're very proud of you.
Thank you, man. Love you.
Love you. Hey, everyone. Thanks for joining me on the Get Real podcast. I hope you feel a little healthier hanging out with me. It's going to be a lot of fun passing this along to others. Please subscribe below. Please share. I'm excited not just to talk about healthcare, but a lot of other fun topics. It's about making healthy talk about healthcare. It's not a lecture. This is supposed to be fun, and look forward to spending more time with you in the future.